Hey everyone, it's good to be back with you. The topic for today, a Trump world order. Watching what's going on, especially with what happened over this weekend, this past Saturday, when Donald Trump had his conversation with Vladimir Putin, and it appears from that conversation that we are going to see sanctions lifted and we're going to begin a new relationship with Vladimir Putin and the Russians, which I believe is a very good thing. But more importantly, I think what we're looking at here is that Donald Trump is not just changing America, he's changing the world. And if he is successful, in 4 years from now, we could be looking at a completely different realignment of the world order. Fortunately, the Trump world order is a world order based on nationalism, free markets, prosperity, and peace. Unlike the Agenda 21 driven New World Order, which is now on the ropes. And they're clearly freaking out, and they should be. Because what's happening, as I've said in other videos, is actually larger than Trump. It didn't just start with Trump, it didn't just start with Brexit. I've been watching this trend for the past 6-7 years. The very first country I saw that really started moving away from the New World Order agenda was Greece. Now, unfortunately, when Tsipras won that election, coming out of nowhere to win that election, he still believed that they had to work through the EU. And trying to leave the EU wasn't all that popular, and maybe that's why he took that position. And, of course, we know that they failed. It's nearly impossible to beat the New World Order at their game when they make the rules. And we saw that play out in Greece. So, a complete rejection of the entire game plan, of the entire program is what you need, and that's what we saw happen with Brexit. So this movement continues. We see the rising nationalist movements in the Netherlands, where they will be having elections this year. Also in France with Marine Le Pen and her Front National party, a nationalist party which wants to leave the EU as well. If Le Pen and Geert Wilders are successful in the Netherlands and France this year in their elections, they will likely leave the EU. If they win the election, then they'll probably be able to have a referendum vote, and we could see those two countries leave the EU. Now, that would really rock the foundation of the EU and the New World Order, because if you lose Great Britain and France and the Netherlands, that really only leaves you with one really stable, powerful country in the EU, and that would be Germany. And Germany is much tougher because of their history. Nationalism is pretty much suppressed there. A lot of Germans are embarrassed about their history. They're going to have to get over that. The type of nationalist movement that Hitler was a part of was not like the nationalist movements that we see today. So the Germans are going to have to understand that. And I think that they will arrive there. I think they'll get there. It's just taking them a little more time. But I wouldn't be surprised that if you see France and the Netherlands also leave the EU, that tidal wave will continue to sweep across Western Europe. So what we see is a realignment of the world order. And we can credit Donald Trump for a lot of it, as it moves forward, getting it actually done. But it didn't start with Donald Trump. He was more or less someone who, like Nigel Farage, the time was right. They were the right men at the right time. They were at the right place, and it all fell right into their lap. Fortunately, they are the right guys to advance that cause and move it forward. So if you look at the current alignment of the world under the New World Order Agenda 21 driven program, you can see the alliances and how they work back and forth to move forward their agenda. But a Trump world order totally destroys this paradigm. First of all, instead of an anti-Russian, anti-Putin agenda, you'll have a pro-Russian. We'll become friends with the Russians. We'll work with them to defeat ISIS, and will respect their national security interests, particularly in Eastern Europe on Russia's western border. And I think we need to do that. There's no reason to be pushing and trying to intimidate the Russians and trying to take advantage of their circumstances. Ultimately, it's not going to pay off for us. And it's driven by a lot of things. But this new alignment is going to have some extraordinary consequences. So what we see right now is that Donald Trump, with this new alignment, is going to have the Russians with him. We also see that Japan seems to be very interested in being a part of this new movement. And so they would be figured in that equation. So you would have Russia and Japan. We already have the UK because of their Brexit vote and their attempt to get away from the EU and have a more nationalist approach to governing. And this is going to continue to sweep across the world. But a lot of countries are going to have some tough decisions to make, particularly a lot of Middle Eastern countries, ones that we have supported, ones that have played both sides of the fence, such as the Israelis and the Saudis. The Israelis, they want regime change in Syria, they want regime change in Iran, they want regime change in Yemen, they want regime change anywhere around them in their region by anyone who they feel that threatens them. Well, Donald Trump is obviously very pro-Israel. He's good friends with Netanyahu, and he's supportive of him. But it's going to be very interesting to see how the Israelis and the Saudis play their cards here, because Donald Trump doesn't want regime change in Syria. I don't think he believes that a regime change in Iran would be a good idea. I think that he'll use every measure possible, with the exception of an actual invasion or a large-scale war in Iran. I think there's other ways to work the Iranians, and if you have the Russians on your side, they can be a great help, because the Iranians are somewhat dependent on the Russians for their national security. They do have good relations, and so you can use Putin to try to work through the problems that are occurring in Iran. Iran is also a country that in the next 20 years is going to look a lot different than it does today. I think with Iran, you got to keep the pressure on them, and you have to exercise patience, because change is coming to Iran as well. But that change must come from within. And I think Donald Trump understands that. The Saudis, of course, they do the same thing as the Israelis, because they pretty much work together. On one hand, they will say they want to fight terrorism, that they're allies of the U.S., and on the other hand, they'll be arming, training, funding, and supporting these radical groups who they call moderates to help them achieve their foreign policy goals, which is typically regime change. So it's going to be very interesting. The Saudis and the Israelis are going to have to make a decision, because the powerful lobbies that they relied on to allow them to operate in this duplicitous fashion is no longer going to be an option to them, because you can tell that Donald Trump doesn't play that game. He's a straight shooter. I mean, he's a friend of Israel and of Saudi Arabia, I would assume, or he certainly didn't put the Saudis on his list. And we know he has a good relationship with Netanyahu and the Israelis. But I think he is going to sit down and tell them, look, I support you. We are going to work together to defeat terrorism. And if he finds out that they're, on the other hand, covertly going about the process of continuing to arm and train and support these so-called moderates, which are not moderate at all, they're just terrorists, I think Trump will call them out on it. So they're going to have a come-to-Jesus moment. If you're the Saudis and the Israelis, they're going to have some decisions to make, some tough decisions. Be interesting to see how that plays out. I think that they see the way the winds are blowing, and I think that they're probably going to come to their senses, and they're going to have to join this new alignment. They're going to have to do some serious soul searching, and they're going to have to change a lot of the things that they've been doing. So this is going to have a dramatic effect on the Middle East, because when you take Saudi Arabia and Israel together out of the equation at supporting these regime changes, you're talking about a completely different looking Middle East. And it's a Middle East that will move more towards moderation. And it's a matter of patience and keeping the pressure on without forcing us or getting us into bogged down into another Middle Eastern conflict. I don't think Trump will do that. I don't think the Iranians are going to force the issue, and I think that the Russians right now, the last thing they need is another expensive war as well. So I think all the cards are stacked in Trump's favor to put together this new alignment, this Trump world order, as I like to call it. There's many other countries that we have to look at. For instance, you notice I haven't talked about China. I think that Trump does want to, I certainly don't think he wants to go to war with China, but I think he understands that China is giving every indication that they're going to play hardball. And he can play hardball too. The fact of the matter is, we dwarf China in military superiority, and as far as economic superiority, we still are economically superior to China. They are not as strong or as in good condition as they would like to have you believe. And we have to look at some other countries out there like Australia and countries in Southeast Asia. Which direction are they going to go? And that will have a lot to do with our direct dealings with China. Whether or not Trump and China are able to tone down the rhetoric and begin to work together to avoid conflict and come up with some policies, trade policies, monetary policies that we both feel are fair. Because right now Trump doesn't like the monetary policy or the trade policies. China is not in position to push back too hard, but Trump understands in a negotiation that he's going to have to give up some things to get some things. So I think he's realistic about this, and I believe the Chinese are too. I think there's a lot of bluster being thrown around, but I think at the end of the day, when the rubber meets the road, the Chinese will have to understand that they got to play ball with Donald Trump. So that is important because China, of course, has made a lot of inroads in the past 20 years into Africa, particularly West Africa, also Australia, and also in South America. So these are areas and regions of the world that are going to have to choose either a China relationship or an American relationship, if in fact you have a split. And again, I don't think that benefits anybody, and I think the Chinese, as well as Donald Trump, his administration, and these countries such as Australia, West Africa, and South America, I think that they'll also be able to read the tea leaves, read the writing on the wall, and understand that we are entering a new paradigm, that we are entering a new world alignment, and the Trump world order is a reality. It's here, and it's happening now, and it's happening very quickly. So, when we talk about the New World Order, the Agenda 21-driven globalist agenda, for those of us who are lovers of freedom and prosperity, we despise the globalist agenda. Fortunately, that is the movement that's happening right now. It's to roll back the New World Order globalist agenda. And this is going to continue until it's played itself out. So we are at a pivotal time in history. We are poised right now in a position for a completely new realignment of the world order. Fortunately, this world order, the Trump world order, is a world order that is not evil. It's a world order that will hopefully restore the world to a way of thinking about peace, prosperity, trade, nation building, nation states, sovereignty, the rule of law, and all these things that we are told and have been told for many, many years that was the goal, when we know in fact that the goal was the complete opposite. The goal was to actually limit the freedom, the prosperity, and the happiness, general happiness of citizens around the world to benefit the 1%, the globalist. So this is all coming to a screeching halt. The Trump world order is here. It's going to be incredible to watch as these dominoes fall. I predict it's going to be successful. Trump will get a lot of pushback. But again, Ron Paul used to say, you cannot stop an idea whose time has come. And the pushback against the New World Order agenda is too powerful of a force to be stopped. It's a force of nature, of human nature, and therefore it will continue. And I believe it will roll over anyone who and anything that gets in its way. So I am looking forward to watching as these new alliances develop, to watch the Trump world order replace the New World Order and move us into a direction that hopefully gives us a period in this world of prolonged peace, and prosperity and freedom are sure to follow. So the Trump world order sounds good to me. If you all like this video, give me a thumbs up, a like, whatever you call that. Share it with your friends on social media, and I'll look forward to talking to you again. You guys have a good day. Bye.